What is aperture? Perhaps the most influential parameters of photography. Aperture plays an important role in composition and setting up a shot. Aperture is a hole within a lens through which light travels into the camera body and onto the camera sensor. To understand, let's look at the human eye. As you move between bright and dark environments, the iris in your eyes either expands or shrinks, controlling the size of your pupil. In photography, the pupil of your lens is called your aperture. You can shrink or enlarge the size of the aperture to allow more or less light to reach your camera sensor. The technical definition of aperture is the opening in a lens through which light passes to enter the camera. In photography, aperture is expressed in f number, also known as f-stop. F-stop indicates how open or closed the aperture is. The smaller the f-stop means the larger aperture, while a larger f-stop means the smaller aperture. This can be tricky to remember since large f-stop means small aperture size. So an f-stop of f1.4 is larger than f2.8 and much larger than f8 or f11. Aside from controlling the amount of light passes through the lens and into the camera, the aperture has a direct impact on depth of field. Depth of field is the amount of your photograph that appears sharp from front to back. A large f number such as f16 will bring all foreground and background object into focus, while a small f number such as f1.4 isolates the foreground or background objects and make everything else blurry. Every lens has a limit on how large or how small the aperture can get. If you take a look at the specifications of your lens, it should say what the maximum and minimum apertures are. The maximum aperture is much more important than the minimum aperture because it shows the speed of the lens. Lenses with aperture of f1.4 or f2.8 are considered as fast lens because they can pass more light into the camera than the lens with the maximum aperture of f3.5 or f5.6. That's the reason why the night photography usually requires fast lenses. The minimum aperture of lens like f22 is not that important because the diffraction will cause the image to lose clarity. It's also worth noting there are two types of lens: primes and zooms. Prime lenses have the fixed focal length, meaning they cannot zoom without physically moving closer or further away from the subject. Zoom lenses gives the flexibility for you to zoom in or out of an object while remaining stationary. While prime lens will have the fixed maximum aperture, the maximum aperture of the zoom will often get smaller as the focal length increases. These lenses are called variable aperture lenses. This is important because for a zoom lens with the focal length of 70 to 200 mm, the aperture may increase from f3.5 to f5.6, decreasing the amount of light entering the camera. Because aperture controls the amount of light entering the camera, it also affects the other parameters such as ISO and shutter speed. A larger aperture or smaller f number will let more light into the camera, allowing you to use the faster shutter speed or lower ISO value. This is beneficial to eliminate motion blur and reduce the amount noise that your camera will produce if its ISO gets bumped up. Faster shutter speeds can be essential in scenes with lots of motion, like sports and wildlife photography. So fast lens can increase your shutter speed or decrease your ISO value if your shutter speed is set to the specific value. Fast lenses are also imperative for any kind of nighttime photography. Whether you're taking pictures of Milky Way or doing a moonlit photo shoots, large aperture will let as much light in as possible. Small aperture can be useful as well. Shooting landscape scenes requires everything in crisp focus. So small aperture will sharpen any out of focus areas it may come about. To enable manual adjustment of aperture values, set your camera to either aperture priority mode or manual mode. Aperture priority will let you change the aperture value manually, leaving shutter speed and ISO up to camera's internal metering system. Manual mode lets you control every aspect of the camera, allowing you to change aperture, shutter speed and ISO. I personally leave my camera in aperture priority mode 99% of time for most types of photography. With all these information, you should be able to start using the lenses and cameras for the best of their ability. Aperture is clearly a crucial setting in photography, and it is possibly the single most important setting of all. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching. Until next time, bye for now.